So, I'd like to welcome all of you here to 11/11 issue 16, our release party. I am just immensely glad and happy and excited about how the new issue is. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, go to 1111journal.com. 1111 is the product of the 1111 class that meets each semester. And so I'd really like to thank our staff from last semester, Anna, Andrew Bonfils, Maureen Burdock, Micah Cubic-Bennins, Candace Hose, Katie Jackson, Charlie Radka, Zach Ravis, Nelson Rivera, and Nora Toomey. Without your hard work, there would not be a magazine. And so let's have a round of applause. So for tonight's reading, we have 4 readers. Our 4th reader isn't here just yet, so hopefully he'll come by. So what I'm going to do is I'll read the bios for each of the readers, and we're just going to go straight through no break. And you're in for a treat. So our first reader is Brandon Brown. Brandon Brown's most recent book is Flowering Mall from Roof. He writes about art and culture for Open Space and Art Practical. He is an editor at Kropskaya and occasionally publishes small press materials under the imprint OMG. In 2014, Big Lux will publish a new book of prose, Shadowlanka, an excerpt of which is featured in the current issue of 1111. Mary Berger is a writer and visual artist based in Oakland. Her writing often combines aspects of poetry, fiction, and essay. Her book, Then Go On, was published by Litmus Press in 2012. Recent work has appeared in the Encyclopedia Project, Volta, Your Impossible Voice, and the Poetic Labor Project. Cassandra Dalit occupies Oakland, California. Cassandra writes of the counterculture of childhood in Vermont and her ongoing adolescence in San Francisco Bay Area. She's published in Slipstream, Sparkle and Blink, Out of Par, Up the River, Hit Mama, and the Criminal Class Review, among many others. The full-length book of poetry, Wet Reckless, will be released from Manic Bee Press in spring of 2013. And lastly, if he comes by, is D. Scott Miller. And he is a Bay Area writer, visual artist, teacher, curator. He sits on the board of directors of Nocturne's Review and is a regular contributor to the East Bay Express, San Francisco Bay Guardian, Pop Matters, City Lights, and Mosaic Magazine. 2011 San Francisco Arts Commission recipient for Afro-Surreal San Francisco Project. Miller is author of the Afro-Surreal Manifesto and is completing a book of Afro-Surreal poems. His Afro-Surreal novel, Not From Here, from which we published an excerpt. So without further ado, Brandon.
Hi. Should I move this? Yes? How's this? Is it good?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here, and thanks for publishing this piece in 1111. I'm really happy that it's in there. And I'm going to read it. But first I wanted to read this little poem that I wrote last week. That's called Philip Seymour Hoffman. So it's the year of the horse. You can tell by the way the firecracker scraps, whinny, lining, moving necropolis. When an artist dies, everything becomes so lightless. Lake light, a big drag. The rain annoying, although we were parched. And like 3 farmers shake their heads, wimple down on a hay stalk. But even the cabbages have teary leaves. It's the year of the horse, not the worm. But so far, this year has swallowed artists like an orca gulps down 10 chum in one gob. Somebody won the Super Bowl. They jump up and down, go home, sleep to wake. My veins hurt, lithe, but a little lifeless, blue as Kool-Aid on a hot drought. Hotter than that. What's easy to forget is that athletic competitions, like poetry, were invented to war against death. Against the death of how anybody's name means anything. It's best to do this with a helmet on. I mean, poetry was invented as a log of least ass. Everyone in the world knows the name Shamu. The Seahawks know it. The Broncos know it. Philip Seymour Hoffman knew it. And it is for this reason orca cum is thick and salty heroin of cum. Okay, so this piece is called Wizards. Have you guys seen that movie 43? Nobody?
With like all the different 10-minute things.
Yeah. Did you see that thing? I haven't seen it. But there is one exchange in the trailers that really moves me. So movie 43 appears to be a series of raunchy vignettes packaged as an over-the-top catalog of humor so abject the trailers pretend to warn you against watching the film. Cover your eyes, block your ears, is its seductive faux disclaimer. Now, not having seen it, I am not sure what its final accomplishment is. Maybe the massive cast of stars in their various situations converge in a spectacular ensemble, like a Robert Altman toilet epic. I'll see it one of these nights, blowing a cubic meter of marijuana smoke onto 15th Street from an open window. For now, the microcosms the various situations bring about are perfectly acceptable for quick viewing on your device. As such, they are ideal for the trailer. Although one has to wonder if these are the most magical moments in the film, ruined by preview. And it's one of these that I'm so interested in. Okay, so Emma Stone is talking to a schlubby guy whose calculated allergy to even legible subculture couture renders him looking like a 90s slacker in, say, Austin. Emma looks nice and sweet as usual. They're involved in a conflict, obviously based on some sort of libidinal experience between the two of them that has become imbalanced. In the trailer, we only get a pair of lines. The guy says, "I can't believe you sucked off that hobo from Magic Beams." After a beat, she says, her eyes sadly indignant and welling with tears, "He was a wizard." So this makes me laugh, right? Of course, I'm in love with my own superiority over these two. My apartment much better than the squalid convenience store. My problems less pitiful than Emma's in this scene. But I'm also genuinely moved by the sentiment, or by the situation that I dream ensued between Emma and the hobo from Magic Beams. Whatever their encounter had been, she was convinced of the supernatural powers. And even when the schlub suggests an all-too-human hobo behind the spangled curtain, she's moved to defend him. And who of us hasn't been enchanted by some person or object whose marketing fabricated an aura of such irresistible allure that we promise ourselves still to that original feeling, even after a dreaded interlocutor disabuses us of our error? Above all, it makes me hate this dude even more. Right? Like, clearly acting in the interest of his own desire to possess Emma, his tactic is to shame her and boost his own power over her. A decidedly unmagical move. I hope this tactic fails miserably, and maybe he ends up himself lurking around the desolate byways by the Magic Beams. When I see movie 43, I'll let you know. Okay. But, so when he translates wizard into hobo for Magic Beams, he condemns Emma to a life in a dual reality. There's one in which she heavy pet a supernatural being. Another where she's tearing up in a semi-7-Eleven. And it's this contradictory reel I relate to most powerfully in this 15-second excerpt. Incommensurability is so steadfast and true, even the movies can't solve it. Emma and I have in common the susceptibility to a passionate belief in possibly illusory figures of redemption. Now, maybe I've lived in the Bay Area too long, but one thing I've learned from my study of classical literature is that magical beings love to show up and convince you to misrecognize their power and disrespect them. It makes their revenge that much sweeter. Okay, but as for wizards. Like, wizards are proverbial frauds, right? The challenge is always to expose them. Faced space with magic, starry black air toughening flying tables, arresting lava as it flows towards a village, directing lava towards a village, rain from nowhere on a cloudless, droughty day making the crops suddenly fat. Wouldn't you maybe suck off any wizard in the aftermath of such a show? Even their name, wizard, is related to wisdom. Their wisdom consists in seeing a magic logic to this world which most of us can't access. And that's the resigned, that's the way it goes with unwizardly life. Like maybe wizards literally do what we experience as merely metaphorical transportation, auto-poetically doubling their body and leading it on a series of wicked adventures. But honestly, you guys, I have no idea what wizards do. I bet it's better than what I do, which is abandon any number of calls to live, filling out my timesheet like it's not a literal epitaph. If I could traffic in their magic, here's what I'd do. I'd colonize the campuses of Silicon Valley and build a new city built of the best parts of all existing cities. You would be there, and I would live there, and there'd be diet pizza, vitamin-enriched whiskey, absolutely no cops. But I don't know. Maybe the parallel life is already here. Tom writes that Facebook feels like a party. But like all shitty, weird, and great parties, it's sometimes hard to tell if it's very fun or not. So we're dancing at a desk made of fake wood and beige tile tapestry, underneath carpet halogen and raging Post-its. It's like somebody eating disgusting turnips 2 cubicles down from me. Anyway, that's where I live. So anyway, then the piece talks about like how this might be 21st century mental illness. But just like any pathology, the initial symptoms are really hard to diagnose. So it's like seeing a new mole. A new stupid mole. Oh my god, what does it mean? So I did have a taste of vintage 20th century mental illness too. Like many of you, I spent most of my extracurricular time at the library. One spring, I read all the books about black magic and witchcraft. The little library in the rural town of Missouri I grew up in, as you might predict, didn't have a terribly rich collection. But I dutifully checked them all out, one by one. And then that semester we had to give book reports, right? So my teacher must have called my parents because soon after when I begged my mom to drive me to the library, she said, okay, but no more books about witchcraft. Little did she know that I had already read them all. But in most ways, my experience with the dark arts was pitiful, like so much of wizardry. Plenty of power, but no friends. I lamented the conventional gendering of covens, cowering behind my velour curtain, wishing I had 11 friends to rearrange the world with. So I had this little flirtation with wizardry, but otherwise I never really had that fantasy period. I didn't even know who Gary Gygax was until John wrote a chapbook called Gary Gygax. So now when I meet people my age and find out they had that fantasy period, I feel like our encounter is inflected by a radically incommensurate experience of adolescence. It's like meeting someone whose parents were artists. My own childhood, in contrast, is mosquitoes and dog shit. Oh well. I'm a little jealous of those who had the fantasy period. The particular features of that sociability seem so adumbrative of our present. Breathing bodies full of mild stimulants, squeezed into small social spaces, like barely organically alive, but nevertheless, gods to their avatars. Somehow I had acquired the rudiments of one of those role-playing games. So I had like a map, I had this book full of like monster drawings, and I had that those overstimulating die, perfectly appropriate to an early Reagan world which offered its consumers a winding paradise of restricted possibilities. But having no friends to rope into a role-playing game, the map, the die, the manual were all useless. One thing I envy, I guess, is how such play formally socialized fantasy, even if it was always with like a bunch of nerds and malevolently male. As Scott Trelevin says in the Salvation Army, as dog-eared and fucked up as it was still better. From an early age, I longed to publicize my most private fantasies, which I guess is probably why you ended up becoming a poet. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like exhibitionist onanism or something like that. Sorry. Anyway, in the fantasies, my charisma blossomed like I was a pop singer or the head of an international spy organization. All of that died, divorced from reflection of the literal mirror into which I sang or played. And it might be better that it was never expressed until this reading. Because after all, there are historical complications that come with transitioning your fantasy worlds into reality, even if you don't publicize them. I'm thinking of Pygmalion and Galatea, and also that film Weird Science. Did you guys see that movie?
Yeah.
So more for Weird Science than the other one. Well, for those who haven't seen it, spoiler alert. Okay, Gary and Wyatt are these two high school dweebs who live in the suburbs of Chicago. Inspired by Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the boys decide to create a woman on their home computer. They hack into a government mainframe for more power, wearing bras on their heads so they connect a Barbie doll to the wires. Lightning bolts and other supernatural occurrences take place, and when the smoke clears, a beautiful woman emerges from Wyatt's bedroom. She asks, giving manufactured but total permission, "So what would you little maniacs like to do first?" The boys name her Lisa, and she leads them on several adventures at various clubs and malls around town. Finally, they have this big party, and after a series of horrifyingly misogynist demonstrations in which Gary and Wyatt attempt to barter and trade Lisa for other women, they decide to recreate the process and create another woman to placate their stronger, more popular peers. But they forget to attach the Barbie doll, right? So they accidentally create a medium-range ballistic nuclear missile. Lisa creates a series of social challenges for Gary and Wyatt to overcome. She transforms Wyatt's brother Chet into a gross and burping monster, and then she becomes a gym teacher in the suburb next door. I didn't need to stare into a computer and wish for something to come to life to make it good. My own was so rich, corpulent, and gross it overfilled whatever gash was reft by friendlessness and the dad-mom war for my libidinal urges. Cyndi Lauper's hair tornado deeper than the marsh from which a band of orcs rise up to rob my health. Over monster manuals, I preferred the Bible and Playboy, two texts obsessed with the love of substitutes. Infectiously girding the ideological signs they brought into form, it touched me from the inside and warmed the 20th century's slow descent into ore. Thanks for listening.